They say that the people who bring you into this world are supposed to be your sanctuary. They're supposed to be the ones who hold your hand when the storm rages outside, the ones who light a candle when your world goes dark. For 25 years, I believed that the people sitting across from me at the dinner table were my sanctuary. I believed their coldness was just their way of loving me. I believed their harsh words were just lessons I needed to learn. But looking back, I realized the truth. I wasn't their daughter. I was their shadow. I was the inconvenient reminder of a life they never truly wanted, a placeholder in a family portrait that always felt just a little bit out of focus. My name is Maya, and on the evening of my 25th birthday, the people I call mom and dad didn't just break my heart. They shattered my entire reality. They handed me a betrayal so cold, so calculated, that it felt like breathing in glass. They sat in a beautifully lit, expensive restaurant, surrounded by the soft clinking of crystal and a low murmur of happy strangers, and they completely disowned me. They did it with smiles on their faces, as if they were finally cleaning a stubborn stain out of their expensive rug. But what they didn't know that day, what none of us could have possibly predicted, was that the universe was watching. And 3 tables away, sitting in the very same room, was the real reason I was born. To understand how I ended up sitting in that restaurant, suffocating on my own tears while my family toasted to my erasure, you have to understand what it was like growing up in the house of Richard and Eleanor Vance. From the outside, our life looked perfect. We lived in a stunning, colonial-style home at the end of a quiet, tree-lined avenue. The lawns were always perfectly manicured, the windows were always spotless, and my parents' reputations were flawless. Richard was a prominent corporate attorney, a man whose voice could silence a room in seconds. Eleanor was a pillar of the local charity community, a woman who spent her days organizing galas for underprivileged children while completely ignoring the child sitting in her own living room. Then there was my older brother, Julian. Julian was the golden child. He was older by 3 years, tall, handsome, and effortlessly brilliant. From the moment he was born, it was understood that Julian was the heir to the Vance legacy. He went to the right schools, made the right friends, and smiled the right smiles. And then there was me. I was always the afterthought. If Julian was the blazing sun, I was the cold space between the stars. I didn't inherit my mother's piercing blue eyes or my father's sharp, commanding jawline. I had soft brown curls and hazel eyes that always seemed to look at the world with too much curiosity. I wasn't interested in corporate law or high society galas. I loved arte. I loved painting. I spent my childhood tucked away in the attic, surrounded by canvas and the smell of turpentine, trying to create worlds that felt warmer than the one I was living in. Maya, you're drifting again, my mother would always say, her voice cutting through the air like a paper cut. She would stand at the door of my attic room, her eyes scanning my paintings with a look of profound disappointment. Art is a hobby, Maya. It isn't a life. Why can't you be more like your brother? You just secure another internship at the firm. You're wasting your time. I used to think that if I just painted something beautiful enough, if I just won a big enough award, they would finally look at me the way they looked at Julian. I remember when I was 16, I won first place in a statewide youth art competition. I was so proud. I ran all the way home from the bus stop, clutching the blue ribbon in my sweaty hand, my heart hammering against my ribs. I burst through the front door, shouting for my mother. She was in the kitchen, organizing catering menus for one of her charity events. I placed the ribbon on the counter, my face glowing. Look, Mom, I won. First place. She barely glanced at it. She reached past the ribbon to pick up a clipboard. That's nice, dear. Make sure you put your shoes away. Julian just got his SAT scores back. A perfect score. Your father is taking us all out to celebrate tonight. Go get dressed in something presentable. Try not to look so disheveled. The blue ribbon stayed on the kitchen counter until the maid threw it away the next morning. That was my life. A series of moments where I was present but entirely invisible. I grew up believing that love was something you had to earn, a currency I never had enough of. I internalized their neglect, turning it into a quiet, simmering guilt. I thought it was my fault. I thought I was simply defective. But as the years went on, the emotional distance grew into something much darker. It became an active, icy resentment. When I turned 21, I decided to pursue a degree in fine arts instead of business. The night I told my father, he didn't scream. He didn't slam his fists on the table. That wasn't Richard Vance's style. Instead, he simply looked at me, put down his fork, and wiped his mouth with a linen napkin. "If you choose this path, Maya, you walk it alone," he said, his voice entirely devoid of emotion. "We will not finance a life of self-indulgence. We have a standard to maintain. If you choose to be ordinary, do not expect us to fund it." And he kept his word. While Julian was given a luxury apartment near his law school, fully funded by my parents, I worked 3 jobs just to afford a cramped, leaky studio apartment on the edge of the city. I survived on ramen noodles and cheap coffee, my fingers permanently stained with paint, pushing through the exhaustion because the art was the only thing that kept me alive. Even then, I still tried. Every holiday, every birthday, I would show up at their house, holding a carefully wrapped gift, hoping that this would be the day the ice would melt. I wanted so desperately to belong. I wanted a mother who would hold me when I cried. I wanted a father who would look at me and say, "I'm proud of you, Maya." Which brings us to my 25-year milestone. A quarter of a century on this earth. A few weeks before my birthday, my mother did something completely unprecedented. She called me. Not a text, not a message passed through Julian, but a phone call. "Maya." Her voice sounded unusually smooth over the receiver. "Your 25th birthday is coming up. A milestone like that deserves a proper celebration. Your father and I want to take you out. Just a family. We've booked a private table at Le Petit Miroir next Tuesday at 8. My heart stopped. Le Petit Miroir was the most exclusive, expensive restaurant in the downtown district. It was the kind of place you had to book months in advance, a place my parents only went to celebrate major legal victories or high-profile anniversaries. "Really?" I stammered, my hand shaking against the phone. "You want to take me there?" "Of course," she replied, though her tone lacked any warmth. "It's time we had a serious discussion about the future. Dress well, Maya. Please don't wear your usual rags. We have a reputation to uphold." I didn't care about the backhanded compliment. I didn't care about her icy delivery. All I heard was that my parents wanted to celebrate me. For the first time in my life, I felt a glimmer of real hope. Maybe they finally saw how hard I had been working. Maybe they saw that I had just sold my first major painting to a local gallery. Maybe they were finally ready to accept me. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. I saved up every spare dollar. I had to buy a beautiful, elegant emerald green dress. I did my hair. I put on the simple gold necklace my grandmother had left me, and I looked in the mirror. For the first time in years, I felt beautiful. I felt like a daughter someone could be proud of. When I arrived at the restaurant that Tuesday evening, the autumn air was crisp, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement like spilled ink. The valet opened the door, and I walked into the warmth of Le Petit Miroir. The air smelled of expensive wine, truffle oil, and high society. The hostess guided me through the dining room, past rows of plush velvet booths and sparkling chandeliers. And there, at a beautifully set table near the grand piano, sat my family. Richard, Eleanor, and Julian. They looked immaculate, like a picture out of a luxury lifestyle magazine. As I approached, my father looked up. He nodded, checking his gold watch. "You're on time." "Good. Sit down." My mother offered a tight, polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The dress is acceptable, Maya. Green suits you, though a bit more jewelry would have elevated the look." "Thank you," I said, my voice soft as I slid into the empty chair. Julian gave me a casual wave from across the table, his mind clearly elsewhere as he scrolled through his phone. The waiter arrived, pouring sparkling water into our glasses. The atmosphere felt heavy, thick with an unspoken tension that I tried my best to ignore. I told myself it was just their usual demeanor. I told myself to be patient. So I began trying to break the ice, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Thank you for bringing me here. It really means a lot. This past year has been. Let's order first, Maya, my father interrupted, raising a hand to cut me off. We have a great deal to discuss tonight, and I prefer not to be interrupted by the staff once we begin. The coldness in his voice sent a sudden, sharp chill down my spine. The tiny spark of hope that had been burning in my chest for the last 2 weeks suddenly flickered, threatened by a dark, suffocating draft. I looked at my mother, but she was busy adjusting her pearl bracelet, completely avoiding my gaze. I looked at Julian, who finally put his phone down, looking at me with an expression that looked dangerously like pity. But what I didn't know that day, what I couldn't possibly see from my angle at the table, was that the universe had already set the stage for something extraordinary. Just 3 tables away, obscured by a large indoor palm tree, sat a middle-aged couple and a young man. They were dressed elegantly, but simply. The woman had soft brown curls, exactly like mine, and her hazel eyes were fixed intently on our table. The food arrived, but the table remained suffocatingly silent. I could barely swallow a single bite. The beautiful emerald dress suddenly felt like a straitjacket. The heavy silver fork felt like lead in my hand. Every time I tried to initiate a conversation, to share a piece of my life, my father would offer a curt nod, or my mother would subtly shift the topic back to Julian's latest achievements. Finally, the plates were cleared away. The waiter placed a single, small chocolate tart with a lone candle in front of me. There was no singing, no happy birthday wishes, just a flame flickering in the dim light of the restaurant. "Make a wish, Maya," my mother said, her voice completely flat. I looked at the flame. For 25 years, my wish had always been the same. Please let them love me. But looking at their cold, masked faces, I realized that some wishes are just beautiful lies we tell ourselves to survive the dark. I blew out the candle. The moment the smoke cleared, my father reached into his breast pocket. He didn't pull out a birthday card. He didn't pull out a gift. Instead, he withdrew a thick, crisp white envelope and placed it squarely on the white tablecloth. He slid it across the smooth fabric until it tapped against the edge of my dessert plate. I stared at it. "What's this?" "Open it," Richard said, his voice dropping into that deep, authoritative register he used in the courtroom. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and pulled out the documents inside. I scanned the top lines, my eyes straining to make sense of the legal jargon. Release of parental liability. Severance of familial relations. Final trust settlement. My breath caught in my throat. The words blurred together. I don't understand. "What is this, Dad?" "Do not call me that, Maya," he said calmly, taking a slow sip of his red wine. "As of tonight, you're no longer a part of this family." The restaurant around me suddenly went dead silent. The music, the laughter of other patrons, the clinking of glasses, it all vanished, replaced by a loud, roaring, rushing sound in my ears, like a tidal wave crashing over my head. I looked at my mother. Surely she would stop him. Surely this was some sick, twisted joke. But Eleanor Vance just sat there, delicately dabbing the corner of her mouth with a napkin. "It's for the best, Maya. We've tolerated your rebellion for years. Your lifestyle, your constant financial drain, your refusal to conform to our standards. It's an embarrassment. We are restructuring our estate, and Julian is taking over the family assets. There is no room for you in our lives going forward." "Restructuring?" My voice cracked, a ragged, broken sound, tears welling up in my eyes, blurring my vision. You're disowning me? On my birthday? Let's be practical, Maya." Julian chipped in, leaning forward, his voice completely casual, as if we were discussing a business merger. "You've been pulling away from us for years anyway. You live in that dumpster of an apartment. You paint your little pictures. You don't contribute anything to the family name." Dad is actually being generous here. Look at the last page. With hands shaking so violently I could barely hold the paper, I flipped to the back. "There's a check in there for $50,000, my father stated, his eyes cold as blocks of ice. "Consider it your final severance. You will sign these papers acknowledging that you have received your final share of any inheritance. From this moment on, you will not use our name. You will not contact us. You will not show up at our home. If you do, I will have a restraining order filed before you can step off the porch. Sign it, and we can all leave." The pain that blossomed in my chest in that moment was unlike anything I had ever felt before. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was a violent, crushing pressure that made it impossible to breathe. 25 years of trying. 25 years of begging for scraps of affection, of sleeping in an attic, of feeling like an alien in my own home. And it had all led to this. A corporate contract. A payoff to vanish. Why? I whispered, a tear finally spilling over and tracking down my cheek, burning hot against my skin. "Why do you hate me so much? What did I ever do to you? I tried. I tried so hard to be what you wanted." "You were never what we wanted, Maya," my mother said, her voice dropping to a harsh, venomous whisper. She leaned across the table, the mask of the polite charity matriarch completely slipping away to reveal the monster underneath. "Look at you. You're a genetic mistake. You look nothing like us. You think nothing like us. You have been a burden since the day we brought you home. We gave you a roof over your head and a name, and you gave us nothing but disappointment. We are done playing parents to a child who doesn't belong in our world. A genetic mistake." The word stabbed into my heart, twisting deep. The sheer, unadulterated cruelty of it left me completely paralyzed. I looked around the beautiful restaurant, feeling so utterly alone, so completely small. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. I wanted to disappear into the shadows. But as I sat there, gripped by a profound, agonizing despair, something inside me shifted. The pain, which had been so sharp, so overwhelming, suddenly hit a wall. It met the 25 years of quiet resilience I had built up in that lonely attic. It met the strength I had found every time I picked up a paintbrush and created light out of darkness. I looked at the white envelope. I looked at the pen my father had placed beside it. And then I looked up at the three people sitting across from me. For the first time in my life, I didn't see towering figures of authority whose approval I needed to beg for. I just saw three incredibly small, hollow, miserable people wrapped in expensive clothes. "You're right," I said, my voice suddenly stabilizing, turning as cold and clear as winter ice. I wiped the tears from my face with a brutal, swift motion. "I don't belong in your world, and thank God for that." I grabbed the pen. I flipped to the signature page. With a firm, aggressive stroke, I signed my name for the very last time as Maya Vance. I shoved the papers back across the table, but I left the check sitting on the white tablecloth. "Keep your money," I said, looking my father dead in the eye. "You think everything can be bought, Richard, but you can't buy a soul, and you certainly can't buy back the daughter you just threw away." My mother scoffed, tossing her head back. "Oh, please, don't act dramatic, Maya. You'll be begging for that check before the month is over. Now leave. We have nothing left to say to you." I stood up, my legs trembling but holding firm. The emerald dress didn't feel like a straitjacket anymore. It felt like armor. I turned away from the table, ready to walk out of that restaurant and into a completely uncertain, terrifying future. But before I could take a single step, a voice cut through the ambient noise of the dining room. It was a woman's voice, clear, elegant, and vibrating with an intense, suppressed emotion. "Excuse me," the voice said. I turned around. Standing just a few feet away, having stepped out from behind the large palm tree 3 tables over, was the middle-aged woman I had noticed earlier. She was beautiful, dressed in a simple but stunning cream-colored silk dress. Her brown curls framed a face that looked incredibly weathered by time, but radiated a fierce, undeniable strength. Beside her stood a tall, distinguished man with silver hair and a sharp, protective gaze, and a young man in his early 20s who looked like he wanted to tear down the entire restaurant. My father frowned, his legal defenses instantly going up. "Can we help you? We are having a private family discussion." The woman stepped closer, her hazel eyes completely ignoring my father, ignoring my mother, ignoring Julian. She looked directly at me. Her gaze scanned my face, my hair, my eyes, with the intensity that made my heart leap into my throat. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't look sad. She looked overwhelmed with a profound, unbelievable joy. "It's not a private discussion anymore, Richard," the woman said, turning her gaze to my father, her voice turning into absolute steel. "Because you were talking to my daughter." The entire table went dead silent. My mother's jaw literally dropped, her glass of wine freezing halfway to her lips. My father narrowed his eyes, his face flushing a deep, angry red. "I don't know who you are or what kind of scam you're trying to pull," Richard snarled, standing up to his full height, attempting to intimidate the woman. "But I suggest you turn around and walk away before I call security. This is highly inappropriate." The silver-haired man stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on the woman's shoulder, before looking at my father with a cold, devastating smile. "Go ahead and call them, Richard. Call the manager, too. I'm sure Arthur would love to know how you treat people in his establishment. Or perhaps we should call the press. I'm sure the local Business Gazette would love to know that the senior partner of Vance & Associates just publicly disowned his child on her birthday." My father stiffened. The name Arthur, the owner of the restaurant, and the absolute confidence in the man's voice instantly told him he wasn't dealing with a random stranger. "Who are you?" The woman didn't look at Richard. She kept her eyes on me, stepping close enough that I could smell her perfume, a soft, comforting scent of lavender and vanilla. She reached out, her hand trembling as she gently touched my cheek. Her skin was warm. "Maya," she whispered, her voice cracking with pure emotion. "My name is Evelyn. Evelyn Thorne. 25 years ago, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl in a municipal hospital. I was young, I was broke, and I was terrified. A corrupt adoption agency told me my baby didn't survive the birth. They told me you were gone. They handed me a forged death certificate and shattered my life. I couldn't breathe. My heart was hammering so hard against my ribs, I thought it would burst. What are you saying? We've been searching for you for 5 years, Maya." The young man behind her spoke up, his voice thick with emotion. "Ever since Mom found out the agency was shut down for illegal child trafficking. They were taking babies from young, vulnerable mothers and selling them to wealthy families who wanted to bypass the legal waiting lists. Families who could pay a premium for a perfect, healthy baby." Evelyn looked back at my parents, her hazel eyes flashing with a terrifying, righteous fury. Families like the Van Cess, who wanted a second child to complete their perfect little social image, but didn't want to go through the proper channels. They bought you, Maya. They paid a corrupt lawyer to falsify your birth records. The restaurant around us seemed to tilt. I looked at Eleanor Vance. Her face had gone completely white, all the aristocratic arrogance draining out of her, leaving her looking old and terrified. She clutched her pearl necklace so tightly I thought the string would snap. "That's a lot," Eleanor hissed, though her voice lacked any real conviction. "Richard, do something. This is slander." "It's not slander when we have the DNA results from the agency's unsealed files, Eleanor," the silver-haired man said, pulling a folded legal document from his jacket pocket and tossing it onto the table, right next to the disownership papers. "My name is David Thorne. I am the managing director of Thorne Industries, and I have spent the last 3 years funding a private investigation into what happened to my wife's firstborn child. We tracked the paper trail directly to you, Richard. We knew you were coming here tonight. We booked the table right behind you. We wanted to see what kind of people you were before we approached." David Thorne looked down at the disownership contract, then picked up the $50,000 check my father had left. He chuckled, a dark, mocking sound, and tore the check completely in half, dropping the pieces into my father's wine glass. "And frankly, Richard, I've never seen such pathetic, miserable excuses for human beings in my entire life," David said, his voice echoing clearly across the now silent dining room. Several other patrons were now openly staring at our table, whispering among themselves. My father looked like he was about to have a stroke. His reputation, his precious, flawless reputation, was crumbling to dust right in front of him in the most exclusive restaurant in the city. This is an outrage. You have no legal standing here. Oh, we have all the standing we need, Evelyn said, turning her back on them completely, closing the distance between us. She took both of my shaking hands in hers. Maya, you don't owe these people anything. They never saw you. They never loved you because they don't know how to love anything but their own vanity. But we know who you are. We've watched from afar these past few weeks. We saw your art gallery show. We saw how beautiful, how talented, how strong you are. You have your grandmother's eyes, Maya, and you have my heart. The tears came then, but they weren't the hot, burning tears of despair from before. They were a torrent of pure, overwhelming relief. The heavy, suffocating weight that I had carried on my shoulders for 25 years, the constant, agonizing feeling that I was broken, that I was a mistake, that I was unlovable, it all washed away in an instant. I wasn't defective. I was just planted in the wrong soil. Come with us, Maya, the young man said, offering a warm, brilliant smile. I am Liam. I'm your younger brother, and we have a real birthday celebration waiting for you at home. I looked at Evelyn. I looked at David. I looked at Liam. I saw the unconditional warmth, the fierce protection, the genuine love radiating from their faces. It was everything I had ever wished for while staring at a flickering candle in the dark. I turned back to the Vance family one last time. Richard was furiously trying to hide the legal documents, his hands shaking. Eleanor was covering her face with her hands, trying to shield herself from the judging stares of the high society patrons around them. Julian was staring at his plate, completely humiliated. They wanted to erase me. They wanted to throw me away like trash on my 25-year milestone. But in their arrogance, they had accidentally set me free. They had handed me the keys to my true legal freedom, completely cutting the only ties that bound me to their toxic world. Goodbye, Eleanor. Goodbye, Richard, I said, my voice filled with a profound, beautiful calm. Thank you for the birthday gift. It's the best one you ever gave me. I turned away from their table, and I didn't look back. I walked out of Le Petit Miroir flanked by my real family. Liam threw his arm around my shoulder, protecting me from the cool autumn wind. David called for his car, chatting warmly about a local art studio he wanted to show me, and Evelyn held my hand tightly, as if she would never let me go. In the months that followed, the fallout for the Vance family was devastating. David Thorne didn't let the matter rest. He used his immense legal resources to expose the illegal adoption ring. And while the statute of limitations protected Richard from prison, the public exposure completely destroyed his legal career. High-profile clients pulled their contracts overnight. Eleanor was quietly removed from every charity board in the city, her name becoming synonymous with scandal and cruelty. Julian's pristine career path vanished as the firm's reputation tanked. They had spent their entire lives building a house of cards made of pride and vanity, and it had collapsed under the weight of their own malice. But I didn't spend my time watching them burn. I was too busy learning how to bloom. I legally changed my name to Maya Thorne. I moved into a beautiful, sunlit apartment with a massive art studio, funded not by a cold severance check, but by a family who believed in my dreams. For the first time in my life, I painted with bright, vibrant colors. I painted family portraits filled with warmth, laughter, and light. Looking back at that night in the restaurant, I realize a profound truth about life. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who will hurt you the deepest. Sometimes, the universe will allow you to be broken down to your very foundation. But it doesn't do it to destroy you. It does it to clear away the ruins of a life that was never meant for you, so you can build something beautiful on the truth. Blood doesn't make a family. Love does. Respect does. The people who see your soul and choose to stand by you in the storm, those are your people. My parents try to ruin my birthday. They try to shatter my world. But they didn't know that my real family was already there, waiting in the wings, ready to save me. And today, as I stand in front of new canvas, surrounded by the laughter of my mother, my father, and my brother, I know that I am finally, truly home.